បំផុសគំនិតថាតើយើងទៅផ្លូវមួយណាស្រួលហើយដោយសារពេលវេលាខ្ញុំក៏ពិតចង់និយាយច្រើនប៉ុន្តែអ្នកសម្របសម្រួលគាត់កេះអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំចង់ចុងក្រោយខ្ញុំចង់ជំរាបជូនថាអញ្ចឹងអ្វីទាំងអស់តកតោឬការធ្វើបរិយាបន្នការដែលចង់មានការរួមបញ្ចូលជនមានពិការភាពអញ្ចឹងសូមអស់លោកស្រីកុំភ្លេចថានៅពេលដែលលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាឬក៏អាដាមលោកជំទាវគិតសកម្មភាពអីមួយត្រូវតែមានតំណាងគាត់ចូលបើមានតំណាងគាត់ចូលដោយសារគាត់អីគេអង្គការតំណាងនេះគាត់ជាជនមានពិការភាពគាត់ធ្វើការលើវិស័យពិការភាពហើយគាត់រស់នៅជាមួយពិការភាពសឹងតែមួយជីវិតរបស់គាត់ចាអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំសូមមានប៉ុណ្ណឹងដោយសារពេលវេលាចាសូមអរគុណ
បាទសូមអរគុណលោកស្រីម៉ូនីកាចំពោះការលើកឡើងនៅបញ្ហាជាពិសេសគឺតាក់ទងទៅនឹងបញ្ហាចប់ថវិកានៅក្នុងការដំណើរការបរិយាបន្នពិការភាពក៏ដូចជាការផ្សព្វផ្សាយសេវាយុត្តិធម៌និងការងារជាដើមអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យខ្ញុំបាទសូមបន្តទៅលោក Benjamin Merus លោកគឺជាតំណាងរងប្រចាំប្រទេសពីការិយាល័យឧត្តមស្នងការអង្គការសហជីវជាតិទទួលបន្ទុកសិទ្ធិមនុស្ស EAC ដែលជាភ្នាក់ងាររបស់អង្គការសហជីវជាតិទទួលបន្ទុកលើកកម្ពស់ការពារសិទ្ធិមនុស្សលោក Benjamin គឺជាមេធាវីនិងជាអ្នកជំនាញសិទ្ធិមនុស្សមុនពេលបម្រើការងារនៅ EAC នៅកម្ពុជាលោកបានចំណាយពេលរយៈពេល8ឆ្នាំជាអនុប្រធានបេសកកម្មនៃការឃ្លាំមើលសិទ្ធិមនុស្សរបស់អង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិនៅប្រទេសអ៊ុយក្រែនយើងបានឃើញហើយថាការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តរបស់រដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាដែលបានបង្កើតក្របខ័ណ្ឌច្បាប់និងគោលនយោបាយជាច្រើនដើម្បីផលប្រយោជន៍ជនមានពិការភាពឧទាហរណ៍ដូចជាផែនការយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រជាតិស្តីពីពិការភាពដំណាក់កាលទី2នេះឆ្នាំ2019-2023ច្បាប់ស្តីពីកិច្ចការពារនិងលើកកម្ពស់សិទ្ធិជនពិការប្រកាសអន្តរក្រសួងឲ្យមានបានបើកបរដោយអាដាមបានលើកឡើងហើយនឹងការមានបទដ្ឋានបច្ចេកទេសស្តីអំពីហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធរូបវន្តបង្កលក្ខណៈងាយស្រួលជាពិសេសគឺច្បាប់ស្តីពីពិការភាពថ្មីដែលយើងកំពុងតែធ្វើវិសោធនកម្មដែលមានការចូលរួមយ៉ាងទូលំទូលាយពីអង្គការជនមានពិការភាពក៏ដូចជាបងប្អូនជនមានពិការភាពខ្ញុំសូមជំរាបសួរទៅលោក Benjamin ថាមកដល់ពេលនេះតើការិយាល័យ OACHR បានជួយដល់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាអង្គការជនមានពិការភាពនិងភាគីពាក់ព័ន្ធក្នុងការលើកកម្ពស់និងការពារបំពេញសិទ្ធិបងប្អូនជនមានពិការភាពដូចម្ដេចខ្លះបាទសូមអរគុណសូមអញ្ជើញលោកបាទ
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Chubrebsu, Excellencies, dear and esteemed participants. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to this very important event today. It's really and truly an honor to be speaking in front of government officials, representative of civil society, international donor community, international organization. I think all the relevant participants to make an inclusive society are in the room. And I was very happy today to hear also that participants from outside Cambodia, from the ASEAN and beyond, were there to share the good practice and experience. So I think all the ingredients here are in place to promote an inclusive society. Now, when we speak about persons with disabilities, I think that in any country of the world, we speak about 10 to 12% of the population. And it's not Cambodia, it's everywhere in the world. Now, when we speak with persons with disabilities, myself, I always have a problem. We shouldn't be speaking about persons with disabilities. We should be speaking about persons with different abilities. And that is a point that we should always all make, because that's essential to address what Your Excellency you have mentioned, discrimination. We just are living in diverse society where we all have very different skills and contribute differently to society. So that's my contribution to the non-discrimination. The second aspect also I would like to dwell on is, Your Excellency, you have mentioned the importance of peace. I come from a country, Ukraine, where I've been working for the last 8 years where there is war. So the price of peace is essential. But at the very same time is how do you maintain peace in any country of the world. And inclusiveness is essential, and making sure that the voice of everyone and the voice of person with disabilities at all time being heard. And I always like to quote this motto of nothing for us without us. Participation, inclusiveness is fundamental. Now you have asked me, moderator, to speak about OHCHR role in Cambodia with regards to persons with disabilities. First of all, I would like to say that it's not OHCHR alone. It's the United Nations. I'm sitting next to my colleague from UNDP, and other UN agencies are being represented in the room and in the country. OHCHR has been invited as part of the peace agreement 30 years ago, and we have been working hand in hand with the government and with the civil society to promote an inclusive society and promote the rights of persons with disabilities. Specifically, I think I've heard a lot this morning already, and education came back again and again and again. Of course, education is a tool for independence and for autonomy. And of course, access to education to all, including to persons with education, is a tool for emancipation. So in that regard, as OHCHR, we have been working with the government, and specifically with the Disability Council, on training government officials at the national and at the local level on how to operationalize the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities. Over the last 3 years, we have been working with authorities in 8 different regions, and we plan to continue doing so in the country in 23 and beyond, because again, it is essential that the authorities understand the meaning of the convention, as well as to operationalize it together with private sector and civil society. The second aspect where OHCHR has been very active, because we have a normative framework, is to work again hand in hand with the authorities and with civil society in amending and putting forward a draft law on persons with disabilities. I think over the last 2 years and throughout the draft, a lot of progress have been achieved in order to bring this draft piece of legislation in line with international standards. I understand that there is a draft that is about to be finalized, and the call on the authorities as well as to the civil society is making sure that before it goes for endorsement, for adoption by the government and by the parliament, then there is a last round of consultation to ensure that once the draft is adopted, it is fully in compliance with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The third aspect, also that is very positive, is that Cambodia has ratified the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities. Now, Cambodia is due to prepare its state report for the period 2013-2020, which is something that is essential, because as over the last 3 days, you have been discussing how to upgrade, improve the National Disability Strategic Plan. The state report will be also a very good tool for you to assess where you stand in terms of abiding by the convention. It's also a fantastic opportunity to foster the dialogue with civil society, with the private sector, because again, promoting the rights in general, but specifically of the person with disability, can be done only from one channel, by consultation with all the relevant stakeholders. So the call really very much is to have a last round of consultation so that the piece of legislation is recognized as a landmark piece of legislation. Another aspect that I would have to mention, and very briefly, is the work of OHCHR, like with other UN agencies, with civil society and NGOs. We are working specifically with Legal Aid Cambodia, as well as with transcultural psychosocial organization. These two organizations are doing 2 different things. One is to foster access to justice to persons with disabilities, because there are difficulties accessing the justice system in Cambodia, because there are, as you mentioned, a lot of bias and misunderstanding. The second project is about a person with psychosocial disability. Again, when we speak about disability, we can't put everyone in one category, and I think, Madam, you did mention that there are people with reduced mobility, with visual impairment, but also with less visible disability, psychosocial disability. So again, how do we address the stigma? So the reason why I've mentioned the two NGOs that OHCHR is basically supporting is as an encouragement for government, but for civil society to speak with them and to understand how jointly we can address the diversity of challenges that civil society and persons with disability are facing. So I will pause there, and again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today in front of you. សូមគោរពអរគុណលោក Benjamin ចំពោះការចែករំលែកនៅអ្វីដែលជាបទពិសោធន៍នៃកិច្ចការដែលការិយាល័យ OHCHR បានធ្វើកន្លងមកបាទជាពិសេសគឺផ្ដោតទៅលើជំនួយផ្នែកច្បាប់និងសេវាយុត្តិធម៌សម្រាប់បងប្អូនជនមានពិការភាពជាបន្ទាប់ខ្ញុំជឿជាក់ថាលោកស្រីបានទទួលព័ត៌មានច្រើនហើយបន្ទាប់មកគឺខ្ញុំបានដឹងថាមានវាគ្មិនរបស់យើងដែលគាត់កំពុងតែនៅតាមប្រព័ន្ធ Zoom បាទយ៉ាងម៉េចដែរលោកសិទ្ធបាទអូខេបាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំសូមណែនាំបាទលោកស្រីសាវឡាក់ធុងខយដែលមកពីប្រទេសថៃដែលលោកស្រីជាសមាជិកគណៈកម្មការសិទ្ធិមនុស្សសិទ្ធិជនមានពិការភាពបាទលោកស្រីធុងខយសាវឡាក់បានបញ្ចប់អនុបណ្ឌិតផ្នែកធនធានមនុស្សពីសាកលវិទ្យាល័យរ៉ាហាំហាំងបាទនៃទីក្រុងបាងកករយៈពេលជិត20ឆ្នាំលោកស្រីបានទទួលជោគជ័យនៅក្នុងការតស៊ូមតិនិងផ្ដល់សិទ្ធិអំណាចដល់ជនមានពិការភាពក៏ដូចជាស្ត្រីមានពិការភាពយ៉ាងសកម្មនៅក្នុងសង្គមផងដែរបច្ចុប្បន្នលោកស្រីជាសមាជិកបាទរបស់គណៈកម្មការអង្គការសហជីវជាតិស្តីពីសិទ្ធិជនមានពិការភាព CRPD នៅក្នុងតួនាទីជាអ្នកត្រួតពិនិត្យនិងតាមដានការអនុវត្តអនុសញ្ញាអង្គការសហជីវជាតិស្តីពីសិទ្ធិជនពិការហៅថា CRPD យើងទាំងអស់គ្នាបានដឹងហើយថាប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាបានផ្ដល់សច្ចាប័នទៅលើអនុសញ្ញាស្តីពីអនុសញ្ញាអង្គការសហជីវជាតិស្តីពីសិទ្ធិជនពិការនៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ2012ហើយយើងក៏បានឃើញដែរថាសមិទ្ធផលនិងវឌ្ឍនភាពការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តរបស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាក្នុងឋានៈជារដ្ឋភាគីនៃ CRPD ជាពិសេសគឺមានអាយដាមអែមច័ន្ទមករារដ្ឋលេខាធិការនិងជាអគ្គលេខាធិការ EAC លោកបានមានវត្តមាននីតិនេះស្រាប់ជាកិច្ចខិតខំប្រឹងប្រែងរបស់លោកកន្លងមកបាទក្នុងនាមលោកស្រីជាសមាជិកនៃគណៈកម្មាធិការ CRPD សូមលោកស្រីចែករំលែកជាមួយយើងខ្ញុំនៅការអនុវត្តឬក៏ករណីសិក្សាផ្សេងទៀតដែលជួយពន្លឿននៅក្នុងការអនុវត្ត UNCRPD បានទេហើយលោកស្រីក៏បានដឹងផងដែរថាអំពីការដំណើរការនៃបរិយាបន្នពិការភាពនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាពីវាគ្មិនបាទរបស់យើងបានលើកឡើងហើយសូមលោកស្រីជួយចែករំលែកនៅបទពិសោធន៍ក៏ដូចជាការពង្រឹងនៃវឌ្ឍនភាពនៅក្នុងការអនុវត្តនៃ UNCRPD នេះផងដែរបាទសូមគោរពអញ្ជើញលោកស្រីសាវឡាក់បាទលោកស្រីមានពេល5នាទីដែរបាទ
Hello, Savla, are you here?
Savla, please start your presentation. Yeah, you speak, please.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you, please.
Oh, okay, sorry. Because I am outside the office, so I have to operate the Zoom meeting via my mobile phone. Also, I would like to go to the second slide due to time limitations. Can you please go to the second? Thank you. I would like to reiterate at the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Once the country become the state party, the country has to undertake their obligations under the Article number 4. So I would like, to read it out loud again to be a clear understanding of mandate and obligations of the state party. That the state party has to undertake to ensure and promote and full realizations of all human rights and fundamental freedoms of all persons with disability, without discriminations of any kind on the basis of disability. To do this, to achieve this sentence, the state party has to adopt or appropriate legislative, administrative, and other measures for the implementations of the rights stated addressed in the convention, and take all appropriate measures, including legislations to modify or abolish existing laws, regulations, customs, and practices that constitute discrimination against women, persons with disabilities, and take into account the protections and promotions of the human rights of persons with disability in all policies and programs, and to refrain from engaging in any act or practice that is inconsistent with the conventions, and to ensure that the public authorities and institutions act in conformity with the convention, and take all appropriate measures to eliminate discriminations on the basis of disability by any persons, organizations, or private enterprise, and to undertake or promote research and developments of universally designed goods, services, equipment, and facilities, and to undertake or promote research and developments of, and to promote the availability of use of new technologies, including information and communications technologies, mobility aids, devices, and assistive technologies suitable for persons with disability, giving priority to technologies at an affordable cost, to provide accessible information to persons with disability about mobility aids, devices, and assistive technologies, including new technologies, as well as other forms of assistance, support services, and facilities, and to promote the trainings of professionals and staff working with persons with disability in the rights recognizing by these conventions, so as to better provide assistance and services guaranteed by those rights holders. So, to achieve the implementations of the convention, the state party has, understand their obligations in each particular point. So I would like, as we have a limitations of time, so I would like to summary the obligations and list the example case. It may be a good practice for one country and might be a lesson learned for the other country. So to ratify the convention and its optional protocol, the state party, as I said, that has to implement the Article number 4, its obligations. It means that the government have to set up the system to review, revise, and establish specific comprehensive system to promote, protect, and ensure full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disability, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. And then Article number 1 also make a clear understanding that persons with disability include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments in interaction with various barriers that may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. So we have to pay attention to, Article number 1 is very important, if we, the state party has to follow the implementations of their obligation. So all persons with disabilities these are key, keywording, all persons with disability. So the convention to apply, imply to intersectionality and diverse identity. and diverse background of peoples. And all human rights and fundamental freedoms, it means that the state party has to follow the human rights perspective to protect, promote, and fulfill. And then the state party has to create the system, a comprehensive system to ensure the promotion, the protection, and fulfills the rights of a rights holder to prevent any kind of or any form of discrimination on the grounds of disability. And the national coordinating body has to be established to fulfill all human rights and fundamental freedom in cross ministries, not only certain ministry or unit under the certain ministry, and long-term impairments. And long-term impairment addressed under the convention is individual factors. And then they need the sufficient available of assistive devices, assistive technologies, and accessibility, reasonable accommodations, and also various barriers that we have to identify what are barriers to hinder participation or meaningful participation of persons with disability in their society. Depend, on the ground or on the basis of impairments. And also diversity of backgrounds of persons. Next slide, please. The third slide, please. Okay. The third one. Sorry. All persons with disabilities, I would like to example from Indonesia. If you follow the Ms. Maulani presentations, that firstly, the organizations of persons with disability or civil society organization include many, individuals with individual who have long-term impairment with different background and different identity. From Ms. Maulani presentations, the organizations of persons with disability in Indonesia, include women with disability for instance, in the indigenous status or migrant worker with disability, and a person who have many diverse background living in other geographic areas as Indonesia as like archipelagos. Land, so they have a different, many islands, and also the administration is decentralized to each island. So OPD organizations of persons with disability work with many people as many possible in different identity and different geographic and individual background. And also all human rights and all human rights and fundamental freedom aspect to protect, promote, and fulfill, and create the system to prevent the discriminations on the ground of disability, and establish the national coordinating body to fulfill all human rights and fundamental freedom. I would like to example the first intergovernmental body like ASEAN adopt the ASEAN Enabling Master Plans on Disability, which include disability in political and security frameworks, economic frameworks, and also socio-cultural frameworks. However, there is still no appropriate and necessary measures to eliminate all form of discriminations when the state, the member of the ASEAN state member has to implement the enabling master plan, including any promotion system to raise an awareness or incentive system to encourage the state part, the ASEAN member to implement the enabling master plan, even though there is the umbrella organizations of persons with disability in ASEAN level, namely ASEAN Disability Forum or ADF, that ADF would like, right now to try to encourage the ASEAN body to consider the adoptions of the guideline of the discrimination system, and also the Australian Disability Inclusive Strategy and Joint Standing Committee on this on the treaty. Did this show up that the disability, the Australian government is really pay attention to inclusive development strategy, and also try to implement the strategy within the governments, cross ministry governments. And also the training, the training to the staff or to the professionals, worker like ILO disability and intersectionality, sensitivity training to promote employment in an open labor market. And UNDP regional hub appoints women with visually impaired as a disability inclusion and employment specialist. Did this show up that UNDP has, pay attention to the consultations and meaningful participation and involvement and engagement of persons with disability, not only particular in a single impairment or a single identity, but also recognize the importance of gender perspectives within a disability movement, and also OSSR play a key role and as a coordinating bodies try to coordinate and establish, the joint committee to have like this platform to exchange whatever related to the decision or the recommendation led by the committee trustee. And also the other good practice on the system and administration.
Your presentation, as you have just only 2 minutes left.
Yes, I will have only this slide because I recognize that the time is already left, and then I still have only this slide. And good practice on the system and administration. The national human rights of the Australia include disability as a major part of its mandate. And national coordinating body and government focal points on disability are available in Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, but they still exclude gender, age, and others, socio-economic background and ethnicities. And like in Cambodia, you have the EAC is a coordinating and focal point on disability. However, meaningful participations of diverse backgrounds and identity is not recognized yet, or a lack of, gender perspective and other identity and backgrounds include in DAC function and work. And no comprehensive system to deal with discriminations on the ground of intersecting discrimination, in particularly disability. And for long-term impairment in this aspect, the sufficient available on assistive technology and assistive device on accessibility and reasonable accommodation. I can say that good practices are from European country that they have a certain policy and guideline on this. However, universal design is a very new concept in our regions. And the most important is that there is no the law to deal with the reasonable accommodations, like the recognitions of the denials to provide reasonable accommodation is discrimination practices right now. There is no law on this perspective. And the other example is Japan. Japan has a decentralized policy on social care system to support many accessibility, reasonable accommodation, assistive device, personal assistant, and other kind of system. However, the implementation is still weak and are not harmonized with the convention, as all decision makers are persons in charge without disability. And also various barriers. So there is no legislation on accessibility. Even though Japan, Singapore adopted a building, for example, is like a case study. Japan and Singapore adopted a building code include accessibility, but there is no comprehensive system to deal with accessibility and reasonable accommodation in other contexts. Thank you.
Thank you គុណសាវឡាក់បាទជាបន្ទាប់អនុញ្ញាតឲ្យខ្ញុំបាទសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណចំពោះលោកស្រីសាវឡាក់ដែលបានចែករំលែកនៅព័ត៌មានបាទដល់អង្គសិក្ខាសាលាយើងនៅថ្ងៃនេះជាបន្ទាប់ទៅទៀតខ្ញុំសូមបន្តទៅលោក Connor Floyd លេខាទី2នៃស្ថានទូតអូស្ត្រាលីប្រចាំកម្ពុជាទទួលបន្ទុកកិច្ចសហការនិងអភិវឌ្ឍលោក Connor បានបម្រើការងារជាមួយនាយកដ្ឋានកិច្ចការបរទេសនិងពាណិជ្ជកម្មរបស់អូស្ត្រាលី DFAT បាទលោក Connor ដោយដែលយើងបានដឹងហើយថាកម្មវិធី Access ត្រូវបានបង្កើតឡើងតាមរយៈការឧបត្ថម្ភពីស្ថានទូតអូស្ត្រាលីខ្ញុំសូមជម្រាបសួរថាតើមេរៀនអ្វីខ្លះដែលកម្ពុជាអាចរៀនបានពីការខិតខំប្រឹងប្រែងធ្វើបរិយាបន្នពិការភាពនិងសមិទ្ធផលសម្រាប់បានក៏ដូចជាបញ្ហាប្រឈមរបស់ប្រទេសអូស្ត្រាលីហើយលោកតើលោកបានទទួលបាននៅបទពិសោធន៍វិជ្ជមានអ្វីខ្លះដែលជាគំរូល្អពីប្រទេសកម្ពុជាដែលលោកអាចចែករំលែកពីបទពិសោធន៍កម្ពុជាទៅអូស្ត្រាលីហើយក៏ដូចជាចែករំលែកពីបទពិសោធន៍ដែលរៀនពីប្រទេសកម្ពុជាទៅប្រទេសផ្សេងទៀតផងដែរបាទសូមអញ្ជើញលោកមានពេលតែ5នាទីទេបាទសូមអញ្ជើញ
អរគុណជំរាបសួរ And yes, welcome everyone and thank you to their excellencies and partners from civil society, INGOs, and of course organisations of persons with disabilities here today. I do apologise as well that I haven't been able to make it along to the full 3 days. I've been quite excited by the agenda. But at the moment, the Access design team for the successor program are doing their 2 weeks in-country consultation. So we've been busy running around talking to everyone in town as well. But I am glad I was able to make it to this session and listen to the good insights of our panellists. I guess in terms of Australia's experience, similar to Cambodia, we do have a national strategic plan for disability. So it's a 10-year plan. Our current one is running from 2021 to 2031. So it's actually a fairly recent plan. And we've only had, it's actually the second 10-year plan. So we've only had one previously. So we're still fairly new to the process as well. I do want to be humble, but I think they got this one right compared to the first one, because they've clearly defined 7 good outcome areas, and they've put clear policy priorities under these outcome areas. And about a full third of the report is dedicated to the nuts and bolts of implementation, which is really important to have in a strategy, I think. You know, it's good to get your aspirations out there and your goals, but it's also good to have some sort of clear, concrete foundations, particularly around roles and responsibilities for different stakeholders. So that's one thing in Australia's plan that I'm quite proud of. I guess the second good example in Australia that comes to my mind is the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or commonly known in Australia as the NDIS. And it was launched in 2013, and effectively it's a comprehensive national system that aims to provide support services to persons with disabilities. And it's a long scheme, we could talk about it for days, but I guess the key takeaway is the choice that it gives persons with disabilities. It puts them at the centre of the insurance scheme, and so after you have your initial assessment, you're then provided a funding amount, which then you can go out and choose as a person with disabilities to go out to different providers and decide how and where you use that funding. And so you actually sign individual service agreements with those different providers. So giving that choice is really quite empowering. And I think it gives people, you know, people know best how they want to be involved in their communities and in their workplaces. And, you know, often with their health choices as well. So yeah, that's one thing I'm really quite proud of about the NDIS. Obviously, it hasn't got everything right, and there's some lessons there for Cambodia as well. There's been some successes with the whole public-private partnerships, but it also requires careful monitoring and regulation. And unfortunately, there has been some disreputable providers in Australia that have taken advantage of the scheme and scammed the scheme, or have provided subpar services to clients. Fortunately, most of those have been able to be picked up and addressed, but it's still an ongoing process. We're still updating the regulation. We're still learning from that. So I guess that's a lesson that I would flag for Cambodia as well, is particularly when you look at public-private partnerships. And I guess the third example is how Australia captures and utilises disability data. It's a big challenge, and getting comprehensive data that's also consistent is the biggest difficulty. And so we're currently trialling a national disability data asset, and so it's a national data set with proper resourcing behind it to pull together all of the different bespoke sets from providers and from the different state governments in Australia to try to reconcile this data and be able to provide statistics that meaningfully give us a picture of what's going on. It hasn't been an easy task. There's going to be a lot of lessons that we hope to share with the pilot, but it's really important to actually have strong evidence behind our policy making to drive our advocacy. So there's certainly some lessons there for Cambodia as well. I guess two short honourable mentions as well is the work through our Australian Human Rights Commission. So we have a Disability Discrimination Commissioner, and that's a really powerful tool. There's been times where the government has got it wrong, where the National Disability Insurance Scheme has done wrong by people, where rights have been violated, and people have been able to go to this independent Disability Rights Commissioner and say, hey, this wasn't right. They investigate it independently, and there's been a lot of times where they found, yes, okay, a mistake was made, and then reforms happen. And so that's been a great mechanism. And also the work of our Peoples with Disability Australia group. So it's a peak body similar to CDPO. They do a lot of great work and have been quite instrumental to policy making. So it's been really quite effective including in them in everything that the government does. I guess, the key lessons for Australia is that it takes a fair while to enact a rights-based approach, and it's really a journey. We certainly don't see ourselves near the end of that, so it takes a long-term commitment. And I guess that brings me to the experiences in Cambodia. I'm feeling optimistic with the direction and how things are going. For the Access program, we found that the engagement with the Ministry of Economy and Finance early on was really important in getting resources mobilised. And I've been encouraged by the dialogue between OPDs and decision makers, particularly lately in the social protection space and the work around disability identification cards. It's really promising progress. And the collaboration between the Disability Action Council and the Ministry of Women's Affairs to address some of those intersectionalities in our disability work as well. That's also important. That's an important lesson that I think we can all learn from. Finally, I say it's really great to see that increasing dialogue, particularly at the provincial level between provincial disability action councils and OPDs. Because ultimately it's going to be those people that know what works best in their local communities, and it's great to see now that they're having an impact on policy making. Very optimistic with how things are headed. Thank you.
Yeah. គុណច្រើនចំពោះលោក Corner សម្រាប់ការឆ្លើយតបហើយនឹងបង្ហាញអំពីសមិទ្ធផលសំខាន់របស់ស្ថានទូតអូស្ត្រាលីដែលបានគ្រប់គ្រងទៅដល់ជនមានពិការភាពនិងរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាជាកិច្ចបន្តមុននឹងខ្ញុំជំរាបសួរទៅវាគ្មិនបន្ទាប់វាគ្មិនចុងក្រោយខ្ញុំបានសូមអនុញ្ញាតពីអាយដាមលោកជំទាវលោកស្រីថាសូមថែមម៉ោង30នាទីដោយសារតែយើងយឺត30នាទីហើយដូច្នេះខ្ញុំសូមថែមម៉ោងនេះគឺដើម្បីជាបើកជាវេទិកាសំណួរចម្លើយផងហើយនឹងស្ដាប់នៅអនុសាសន៍បាទហើយនឹងក៏ដូចជាដំណើរផែនការអនាគតរបស់យើងថាយើងត្រូវធ្វើអីបន្តទៀតពីវាគ្មិនកិត្តិយសរបស់យើងផងដែរសម្រាប់វាគ្មិនចុងក្រោយខ្ញុំសូមជំរាបសួរទៅលោកស្រីសូណាលីដែលជាតំណាងឲ្យអង្គការ UNDP ហើយលោកស្រីគឺជាអ្នកជំនាញផ្នែកគោលនយោបាយហើយនឹងរចនានៅអង្គការ UNDP ប្រចាំប្រទេសស្រីលង្កាផងដែរហើយក៏សូមជំរាបជូនផងដែរថាលោកស្រីទទួលសញ្ញាបត្រអនុបណ្ឌិតផ្នែកច្បាប់ពីសាកលវិទ្យាល័យ Harvard នៅសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកយើងដឹងហើយថា UNDP គឺបានមានគម្រោងជាច្រើនធ្វើការជាមួយនឹងបងប្អូនជនមានពិការភាពក៏ដូចជាសហការជាមួយអគ្គលេខាធិការឋានក្រុមប្រឹក្សាសកម្មភាពជនពិការអង្គការជនពិការកម្ពុជា CDPO មានកម្មវិធីជាច្រើននៅក្នុងនោះហើយខ្ញុំក៏សូមជំរាបសួរលោកស្រីផងដែរថាតើមេរៀនសំខាន់អ្វីខ្លះដែលលោកស្រីចង់ចែករំលែកជូនអង្គសិក្ខាសាលានាពេលនេះបាទសូមគ្រប់អញ្ជើញលោកស្រីមានពេល5នាទីបាទអរគុណ
អរគុណច្រើនthank you my Samrit Excellency Chan Makra Excellencies essentially secretaries of state, under secretaries of state from different ministries. Secretaries of state, under secretaries of state from different ministries as well as government officials present here today. Members of the disability people's organizations, persons with disabilities, my colleagues on the fellow panelists. Thank you very much for this opportunity to sort of look at how we can identify some of the lessons learned from implementation of the current National Strategic Development Plan, and also how we can chart a way forward on the next phase of the plan. I think importantly taking into account the vision of persons with disabilities in Cambodia. For themselves and the different futures that they may want for themselves. I would like to start, as I did on Monday morning, by acknowledging the remarkable achievements of the government of Cambodia in bringing together so many different stakeholders, but also very importantly giving a platform and voice for persons with disabilities and their organizations. I think this is a remarkable achievement. You also are now in the process of finalizing the draft law on disability, and we hope that this would be done in line with the standards of the UNCRPD and that it would be approved very shortly. So there are also many other achievements that I think Excellency Makara as well as my Samit referred to. So I'm not going to take your time because I know that lunch is imminent, and I think we should also give a voice to the people in the audience. So I'll try to get straight to the point, and please forgive me if I sound a little bit abrupt in the process. So as I said, I think now the real task at hand is how do we draw on these policy frameworks that are being approved, including the law, and how do we move forward, building on the successes as well as the lessons learned. Now, looking at the National Strategic Development Plan going forward, one of the recommendations that we have is that maybe we would like to be a little bit more specific in terms of identifying priorities. We know that budget constraints is one of the challenges that were identified by some of the other panelists, and we know that there are also a certain amount of capacities within government as well as other stakeholders to be able to implement all of the rights of persons with disabilities. So maybe one of the things that we could do going forward is to see how we can perhaps through a quick mapping identify what rights we would like to really focus on, which could have a multiplier effect or some kind of effect in also taking forward some of the other rights at the same time because of limited budget and other capacities. So, and also the other question is whether, you know, we need to be, we can have a broad vision, and I know that the government of Cambodia is looking at its 2050 vision, already a 2030 vision, which is also going to be further finalized after the national elections. So this is an evolving process, and so we can have certain visions for the mid to long term, but then what can we immediately achieve under the next phase of the plan? And for this, I would also recommend that we have concrete results that are identified with indicators to measure the status of achieving these results, as well as what are the gaps that we have in terms of budgets and other inputs that are required to achieve the milestones and ultimately the result. I'm really happy to come after Connor because I think Connor also shared some of the practical difficulties that, you know, and the realities of giving effect to rights of persons with disabilities, even in a country like Australia, which is, you know, further down the development trajectory. So I think we need to be mindful of the challenges, but also, you know, as I said, realistically identify what some of these priorities could be. I would just like to highlight a couple, which, you know, I was thinking about with the team. One is around essentially economic empowerment of persons with disabilities. From what we can see, this could have a big sort of multiplier effect on many other aspects of socioeconomic rights of persons with disabilities. We know that there is a 1% quota for persons with disabilities in the public sector, 2% for persons for persons of disability employed in the public sector, 1% for those employed in the private sector. How can we operationalize this practically? We heard this morning from the Thailand experience where they had set up an empowerment fund for persons with disabilities, and where essentially there is a mandatory quota for companies to include persons of disabilities in their workforce. And if they fall short of those mandatory quotas, then there is a payment that needs to be made to an empowerment fund, which is managed for persons with disabilities to take zero interest loans, or otherwise for disability organizations to tap into for promoting rights. So we also know that you know, there are other types of mechanisms that we can look at across the globe to see how can we practically operationalize this. So this is something I would recommend. We also have an experience from UNDP in Rwanda, where there was an assessment of private sector done to see which private sector companies had the facilities to accommodate persons with disabilities. Then these persons with disabilities were given a paid internship in these companies with a strong prospects of being absorbed into the company. So I think there are different types of options that we can look at, and I'm sure Excellency Makara would be very happy, you know, to lead this type of effort going forward. The other big one I want to say is more about an enabler. How do we accelerate this process? So another thing we could look at is technology and digitalization. I have seen with my own eyes small companies in Vietnam, sometimes owned by persons with disabilities, who provide digital training for persons with disabilities, and then they are absorbed as part of the workforce to work in digital ways for you know, whatever the products that the company is producing. So again, digitalization and technology can be an accelerator and enabler, and I hope that we can look at these types of options and very sort of specifically absorb this into the next phase of the National Strategic Development Plan, so that, we could also concretely measure what we have achieved together. I will stop at this. Thank you so much. And again, to Excellency Makar, I think for the, great leadership on this very important cause. Thank you.
បាទសូមអរគុណលោកស្រីសូណាលីបាទហើយក៏សូមអង្គវិធីទាំងមូលមេត្តាផ្ទះដៃជូនវាគ្មិនកិត្តិយសរបស់យើងបាទផងដែរបាទអរគុណច្រើនមុននឹងខ្ញុំបើកវេទិកាសំណួរចម្លើយខ្ញុំបាទសូមជម្រាបជូនផងដែរថាតាមការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តនិងកិច្ចខិតខំប្រឹងប្រែងរបស់រដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាលោកបានកំពុងតែធ្វើវិសោធនកម្មទៅលើច្បាប់ស្តីពីពិការភាពក៏ដូចជាសិក្ខាសាលាថ្ងៃនេះតាក់ទងនឹងការឆ្លុះបញ្ចាំងអំពីផែនការយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រជាតិដំណាក់កាលទី2ហើយសង្ឃឹមថាផែនការយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រជាតិដំណាក់កាលទី3នឹងត្រូវបានធ្វើឯកសារទាំងពីរនេះនឹងរៀបចំឆាប់រហ័សជាទីមិនខានបាទហើយក្នុងនោះគឺខ្ញុំបាទសូមបើកវេទិកាសំណួរចម្លើយទៅដល់អង្គសិក្ខាសាលាបើសិនជាមានសំណួរអាចអញ្ជើញសួរហើយសិក្ខាកាមរបស់យើងអ្នកចង់សួរសំណួរគឺអាចប្រាប់ឈ្មោះអង្គការក៏ដូចជាវាគ្មិនកិត្តិយសមួយណាដែលលោកស្រីអាយដាមលោកទាវចង់សួរបាទសូមអរគុណបានអញ្ជើញបាទ
បងសមត្ថអធិស្ឋានដោយសារយើងមានពេលតិចខ្ញុំគិតថាយើងសូមឲ្យវាគ្មិនរបស់យើងគាត់មាន final comments ហើយយើង open សម្រាប់ចុងក្រោយសំណួរចម្លើយហើយអាចអាដាមគាត់មានបញ្ជាក់ចុងក្រោយដើម្បីយើងបិទ dialogue តែម្ដងចាមិនដែរ
បាទតាមការសំណូមពរខ្ញុំក៏យល់ឃើញអញ្ចឹងដែរបើសិនជាអាចគឺអាចអញ្ជើញវាគ្មិនកិត្តិយសអញ្ជើញមានប្រសាសន៍បាទ3នាទីបាទចុងក្រោយដើម្បីមុននឹងយើងបន្ទាប់ពីអនុសាសន៍បាទរបស់វាគ្មិនកិត្តិយសហើយយើងនឹងបើកវេទិកាសំណួរចម្លើយតែម្ដងអញ្ចឹងបាទអញ្ចឹងជាដំបូងខ្ញុំអញ្ជើញលោកស្រីម៉ាក់ម៉ូនីកាបាទអញ្ជើញមានប្រសាសន៍តកតងទៅនឹង
ចាសូមអរគុណសាជាថ្មីបងអញ្ចឹងអ្វីដែលជាអនុសាសន៍របស់នាងខ្ញុំយល់ឃើញថាតកតងបដិបត្តិកិច្ចគាំពារសង្គមគឺកំពុងតែបដិបត្តិមួយកំពុងតែយើងអាចនិយាយថាមិនមែនជាក្តៅកគុកទេតែជាបដិបត្តិមួយក្នុងការស្ដារឡើងវិញជូនមានពិការភាពអញ្ចឹងបើសិនជាអាចបានយើងអាចគួរតែគិតពិចារណាតកតងរឿងចំណុចនេះហើយទី2តកតងរឿងការស្ដារឡើងវិញផងដែរជូនមានពិការភាពដែលគាត់យើងមិនអាចនិយាយថាបន្ទាប់ពីកូវីដទេប៉ុន្តែនៅក្នុងដំណាក់កាលកូវីដឬក៏ក្រោយពេលកូវីដចាអញ្ចឹងអ្វីដែលយើងអាចគិតទៅបានតកតងពីចំណុចហើយចំណុចទី3តកតងនឹងអ្វីដែលខាងសមាជិកអាស៊ានគាត់លើកឡើងតកតងខ្ញុំដូចជាស្ដាប់ច្រឡំប៉ុន្តែលើសូពីអសម្មលីមួយប្រហែលជាអាចគោរពមួយដែលយើងបង្កើតដោយរដ្ឋាភិបាលក្នុងការដែលយើងគោរពទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងគឺយើងក្នុងការដែលយើងជាយន្តការមួយនៅក្នុងការដែលយើងឆ្លើយឆ្លងនៅអ្វីដែលជាការអនុវត្តល្អហើយនឹងមានអីដែលសូមភាគីពាក់ព័ន្ធអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំគិតថាបើសិនជាយើងបានបង្កើតតកតងរឿងក្រុមនេះឡើងខ្ញុំគិតថាល្អមែនតើសម្រាប់មិនត្រឹមតែព្រោះដោយសាររឿងវិស័យពិការភាពហ្នឹងគឺអន្តរវិស័យច្រើនអញ្ចឹងយើងកន្លែងហ្នឹងបើសិនជាយើងថាបើយន្តការមួយដើម្បីមានភាពងាយស្រួលយើងមិនត្រឹមថ្នាក់ជាតិថ្នាក់ក្រោមជាតិទេប៉ុន្តែថ្នាក់ជាតិថ្នាក់ក្រោមជាតិហ្នឹងមានវិស័យផ្សេងគ្នាទៀតចាអញ្ចឹងអានេះគឺជាអ្វីដែលជាអនុសាសន៍នាងខ្ញុំដែលមុនដែលចប់ហើយទី1ទៀតដែរខ្ញុំប្រហែលជាអាចឃើញនៅក្នុង strategy plan របស់យើង9ចំណុចហ្នឹងប្រសិនជាអាចបានយើងគួរតែមានចំណុចមួយដែលតាក់ទងនឹងខាងនេះជាគ្រាន់ជាអនុសាសន៍មិនមែនជាការនេះទេអាចយើងនិយាយបានតាក់ទងនឹងការវិនិយោគឃុំសង្កាត់ប្រកបដោយបរិយាបន្នសម្រាប់ជនមានពិការភាពអញ្ចឹងបើសិនជាយើងមានកញ្ចប់ថវិកាជាក់លាក់ទៅហើយប្រហែលជាអាចថ្នាក់ជាតិក្រសួងណាមួយដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធដែលតាក់ទងរឿងការទម្លាក់កញ្ចប់ថវិកាថ្នាក់ក្រោមជាតិទៅខាងណាជាអ្នកអនុវត្តទៅខាងណាជាអ្នកក្នុងការដែល involve ក្នុងការដែលចូលរួមអនុវត្តរឿងហ្នឹងហើយកន្លងមកយើងឃើញតែចេះបើអានេះសម្រាប់ទស្សនៈខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់ដែលក្នុងនាមធ្វើការវិស័យពិការភាពខ្ញុំគិតថាចំណុចដែលយើងធ្វើឲ្យមាននិរន្តរភាពមានផ្លូវមួយហ្នឹងឯងដែលមានភាពងាយស្រួលហេតុអីដោយសារយើងគិតថាបើសិនជាដៃគូអភិវឌ្ឍឬក៏ស្ថាប័នមួយចំនួនយើងមិនអាចនៅរហូតបានទេប៉ុន្តែនៅពេលដែលយើងចេញទៅយន្តការនៃការប្រជុំទៀងទាត់យន្តការនៃការដាក់បញ្ជារឿងបញ្ហាពិការភាពតម្រូវការអីផ្សេងគឺថ្នាក់ជាតិទៅពីលើទៅតែម្ដង អញ្ចឹងអ្នកក្រោមជាតិលោកអាចធ្វើបន្តទៀតបានចាអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំមានប៉ុណ្នេះចាសូមអរគុណ
បាទសូមអរគុណលោកស្រីមូនីកាជាកិច្ចបន្ទាប់ខ្ញុំសូមអញ្ជើញលោក Benjamin ដើម្បីផ្ដល់ជាអនុសាសន៍ចុងក្រោយបាទសូមអញ្ជើញបាទលោកមានពេល3នាទីបាទ
Doesn't work? Yes. Thank you very much. I promise to be very brief. I think there are 3 points in concluding that I would like to make that I think are critical when looking ahead. The first one, and I think it was mentioned by a number of speakers, is data collection. I mean, it is impossible to develop policies and program and activities if you don't have the data. It's not always easy. It has been mentioned by our colleagues from Australia. But again, there is a lot of good practice from all over the world. And I think it's an encouragement for the government and the civil society to sit again together on how to put in place a system of data collection that will allow to put in place policies that are evidence-based and allow to respond to the needs and the rights of persons with disabilities. Directly connected to that is providing adequate funding. But you can't provide adequate funding if you don't have the proper data. Now, providing adequate funding doesn't mean only to allocate an amount of money. It's allocate an amount of money for the right purpose. And to that, and to do so, again, we are back to the point that was made repeatedly this morning, is participation and inclusiveness, meaning all the various relevant groups, when a budget is being discussed, either at the national level with the Ministry of Finance or line ministries, or with the Committee on Finance at the Parliament, then relevant groups, civil society, person with disabilities representative group are being invited to discuss at the national level and at the sub-local level the budgets to make sure that the allocation is made to respond to a specific needs and a specific right. So I will stop there, and I look very much forward to continue our cooperation with the government and with civil society for the benefit of persons of disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. អរគុណច្រើនលោក Benjamin បាទហើយជាកិច្ចបន្តខ្ញុំសូមអញ្ជើញលោកស្រីសាវឡាក់ដើម្បីផ្ដល់ជាអនុសាសន៍ចុងក្រោយបាទលោកស្រីមានរយៈពេល3នាទីបាទសូមអញ្ជើញ
Hello. Thank you. My conclusion is meaningful participation of persons with disability is the important. But the participation itself is nothing. But we need it is meaningful. The meaningful participation means person with disability must be treated the same as other persons. For instance, like in the panel's speaker today, time arrangement or time management should be equal with other, and then the management to control time, you know, time given to each participant, each speaker should be treated as equal basis as other. That I feel very totally different and exclude from the panels today. Yeah, I would like to reiterate. If you want to success the inclusions, please be sensitive to management and how to teach persons with different identity, different background, and within, you know, uncontrolled factors. Thank you.
បាទសូមអរគុណច្រើនលោកស្រីសាវឡាក់បាទហើយជាកិច្ចបន្តខ្ញុំសូមអញ្ជើញវាគ្មានកិត្តិយសលោកស្រីសូណាលីដើម្បីជូនជាអនុសាសន៍ចុងក្រោយបាទលោកស្រីមានពេល3នាទីសូមអញ្ជើញបាទ
អរគុណច្រើន Okay, so for me 3 things. One, let's I hope have the new law approved with the will of the government. In line with the UN Convention on the Persons of Rights with Disabilities, Let's build on the good work that has already been done and the achievements that we have to show for it, led by the government. Let's build on that to see how we can be more strategic and focused for the next phase of the National Strategic Development Plan in having priorities identified in line with available budget, but also looking at new sources of financing to complement that. And let's see how we can have specific indicators and milestones to measure progress of implementation. Implementation being, I think, the key word. And let's have the inputs of persons with disabilities in designing how these activities are planned and implemented. Thank you very much.
បាទសូមអរគុណលោកស្រីសូណាលីហើយជាកិច្ចបន្តខ្ញុំសូមអញ្ជើញលោក Corner ដើម្បីផ្ដល់ជាអនុសាសន៍ចុងក្រោយបាទសូមអញ្ជើញលោកបាទ
I guess the recommendations that come to mind for me are those related to the access program and how we can practically further what we're talking about today. For the successor program, three things come to mind for me. Firstly, we have to work closely with the Royal Government of Cambodia. This is for the sustainability of our work, it's for the ownership, and they have strong commitment, and so we want to continue that. Secondly, I think, following Cambodia's deconcentration and decentralization agenda, we need to look at the provincial level more and build capacity. I know, the access program already does a fair bit of work with our target provinces, and we've got deputy provincial governors here today. They're willing to engage. This is a level that we should do, a level of government that we should do more with and build more capacity. Local people know what works best in their localities. And sort of thirdly, I guess one thing, and it might be a bit niche and down in the weeds,